Did you pray today? I can get down on some gang. Did you pray to get down on the gang?
But for this one, we're just going to talk about pre-existence, right? I did briefly mention, but I didn't get too much of it. But this video, I am going to go more in depth with it. There's a couple of references here. I'm going to use like about 8 or so straight off the gate, basically, right? In order to be a creature or creation, you have to be part of existence. So like in creation or a creature. But if you existed before all that, whatever is being made within existence, you're pre-existing. So that's where that word comes from. Anything that was before creation / existence. And Jesus, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, right, pre-existed before creation, right? What is the main indicator? Again, Colossians 1, right? That's what we started off with the last video. And we're just going to focus between 16 and 17. So there, if you read those two verses, it's really difficult to make it say Christians, I'm sorry, Christ is basically just another byproduct of creation, right? It's very hard to say. So for most people, right, especially in apologetics, it's something I've been interested in for quite a while in the beginning of this year. In order for this to be true, right, to further push that notion that Christ is a creation, you have to manipulate the text. And so one of these ways they can do it, which has already been done, is if you actually read the Jehovah's Witness Bible, they actually change a couple of things in there for it to be indicator to not allude to him pre-existing. And so if you read the interlinear Bible and compare it to the Jehovah's Witnesses Bible compared to the original manuscripts that the Bible is really based on, you can see that the words that are not there, they've been purposely left out in a way that if you read the Jehovah's Witnesses Bible and that's the only thing you're exposed to and you're reading into it, you wouldn't be none the wiser. However, for those that have been experienced with the scriptures and really familiar with it, especially when they go back on the manuscripts that's based on when it comes to Koine Greek, they see that these are deliberate attempts to push something that is not authentic to what the writers did, and more importantly what God wanted to. Oh, whoa, almost fell. I don't want to really fell. I thought this chair would hold down my weight better. I guess not. Kind of got distracted there, not gonna lie. And more importantly, what God wants to demonstrate through his word. Whenever something is being made, right, whether it be a creature or some kind of like physical thing, right, whatever, Jesus was actually part of it. If it wasn't for Jesus, if it wasn't for his word still being God at the end of the day, nothing would be ever made at all. That means none of this will be possible. That means we will never be reaching up to this point that you watching this video, because we're all byproducts of creation. Without him, without Christ, none of this will be possible and you wouldn't be watching this video. So that's something to keep it in mind. So in those instances, we do see him having that eternal nature. You know, he was the very only thing at that point in time. So we're talking about before the world was just God being eternal, right? He was the only one that's being eternal. When he started creating things like humans, we're made into his image and his likeness. We're not exactly like him, but we're pretty similar to the point that if we die, we continue existing eternal beings, whether that be in heaven or hell. The only reason we come up to that is because God grabbed certain aspects of himself and just put his, I would say, characteristics and attributes onto his creations, and then they become like part of him. And a good example is the first page in the Bible. Jesus has been portrayed as the true light, you know, not just anybody, but the light that's the original. And we see God said, let there be light. Start off with his idea. He had a concept and he wanted to be so. He spoke it into existence, but that light didn't came from nowhere. It came from God. So that thing, right? When I want to draw something, it comes from an artist and I put it on something tangible and I just let it out there, but it came from me, right? This doesn't pop out of nowhere. Same thing what's being on here. The eternity that we now have, our souls, once our flesh is dead, it continues existing on because it's something that he has fashioned to be of like who? Of Christ, of God at the end of the day. So that's something to keep it in mind. Also, Hebrews 1:10, a really good example of his eternal nation, and he's always existed with God as God since the very beginning. John 1:4-5 talks about those that are not in the light, they just live in darkness and they cannot comprehend the light. And that really stuck out with me, you know. There's a lot of instances when it comes to light, truth, and so forth and so forth. But it's like God really just points these very simple, but at the same time very intricate explanations to how his divine nature and what he embodies is very surreal, if anything. Christ has no darkness in him at all, right? Like, it's not possible for him to be something that he's never was or never will be, which is very interesting. For him to basically embody the true life, he has to be the true light. That's the only way that would actually work. Reinforcing itself through his word, how he is the true light. It just doesn't say it as like a statement of fact, and it doesn't really like expanded on it. You actually see that there's no darkness at all. If you walk with him, we don't walk in darkness. So it goes to show like what these descriptors are, showing that we are no longer living in ignorance. We're no longer doing things out of evil and malice, with deliberately or not. And it's just so intricate. It really is. And when we walk by the Spirit and we walk in this path, right, John 14:6, we're just basically understanding, being enlightened. And it's weird because like in language, you get to see very instances of God, his identity and his attributes being very present, even in language in itself, whether it be English or a Semitic language. And these words always like comes back into portraying God, right? One of God's names or titles is El, and in Spanish that's referred to as someone who is masculine. I find that very interesting, like El Shaddai, that's Hebrew for the teacher, if I'm not mistaken. Nevertheless, just small side lesson there. Don't really want to deviate away too much, but it's just very interesting that when it comes to light specifically, it's very predominant in the language itself, whether it be English or any other.